Well, it's our favorite new annual tradition. The Lions go back to Lambeau and once again come out with a W, and everyone gets to scream FTP for another week. Welcome in to the Payne and Drain show. I'm your host Zach Payne. With me as always is my co-host Alex Drain. And Alex, how are we feeling after another big divisional win?
Feeling pretty good. This was a big win that really didn't seem likely at points in the game. I think a lot of Lions fans probably at the moment the Branch ejection happened, they were up 7-3. The Packers then were going to have the ball in Lions territory, and you're looking at something like 35, 40 minutes of remaining game time playing without Branch, playing without JMO, playing in, the weather on the road. Looked pretty dicey at that point in time, and they managed to figure out a way to get it done, and they're now in really firm possession of first place in the NFC North, the driver's seat for the number one seed in the conference. Hard to have a lot of complaints right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned the first bit of this game is where things really felt stressful because the Packers started the game by deleting half of the first quarter, and after that you kind of felt like, okay, the Packers came in with a good game plan. The Lions are going to be in tough in the rain, their first outdoor game of the year. But to the Lions' credit, they dug in. They really took it to the Packers in the kind of the final 5 minutes of the second quarter and the first 5 minutes of the third quarter. And completely, the game flipped on its head. And once it was out of reach, the Lions were in cruise control the rest of the way. This certainly, we'll talk about the offense first because, as always, this was a game where Jared Goff, we know that he has struggled in weather before, and yet he came out in the rain and he did what he had to do. Wasn't his best performance. His yards per attempt was down around 6, which is a noticeable drop off, but he was very efficient. No turnover worthy plays, and he did his part to help the Lions stay in control offensively and do what the Packers couldn't do, which was take care of the football.
Yeah, Goff had a nice game. He didn't necessarily tear it up, but he avoided the turnovers, and that was really the key to the game in the second half. And he made some solid throws overall, 18 of 22 for 145, 6.6 an attempt. Nothing crazy, but again, did what was needed. And I think that's kind of the story of this game, is in a similar way to the Titans one last week. It's an unusual game in some of the ways, but the Lions have shown the ability to, kind of like a chameleon, they can play different kinds of games and they can blend into the situation, and they understood the task at hand and they did what was needed, and Goff was a big part of that.
Yeah. There's no game script that the Lions are uncomfortable with. And that's what makes them one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL, to where it doesn't matter if it's a slugfest, it doesn't matter if it's a shootout, it doesn't matter if it's the cleanest game in the world. The Lions have multiple paths to victory every time they step on the field. And that's what makes them so dangerous, especially for a Packers team that had an injured quarterback coming in, that has some consistency issues, some discipline issues that we saw in this game, where a lot of penalties at the line, a lot of just weird procedural penalties too. They were struggling, dare I say, had trouble with the snap. Like they had their issues as a young and growing team, whereas the Lions really looked locked in most of the game. Obviously, there was the Brian Branch ejection, which we'll get to, that could have had them get off script and kind of get emotional. It was an emotional game. We saw that even from before it started. Amon-Ra St. Brown walks in with the Green Bay Sucks hoodie on, and all game, Amik Robertson was really going at Christian Watson and the Packers fans. Brian Branch was giving it to the Packers fans as he left the field. You could tell the Lions were very emotionally invested in this game, and I think this is the first time that the coaching staff has really failed to have the players like control themselves, if that makes sense. Even though they were able to play a clean game, the actual game was clean, but emotionally there was definitely a lot more to it. And so I think Goff being so efficient and keeping the turnovers out of this is really helps as well, because if this got into a point, we saw in the NFC Championship where everything goes wrong at once. This is one of those games where I think that could have happened if the slope started, because the Lions were so emotionally, just they were out of sorts in this game and too emotionally invested in beating Green Bay, which, to be fair, FTP, I get it. Now, obviously, the engine of this game, of the Lions offense, is the run game. This was similar to last year's game in Lambeau. Heavy dose of David Montgomery to start, and then Jahmyr Gibbs comes in and gets more splash plays. What were your thoughts on the split in this game? Because I think it was like 11-3 the carries from Montgomery to Gibbs in the first half, and then that starts to balance out. Like, did you agree with that, or did you wish Gibbs got more involved early on?
I didn't feel like it was majorly missing because Montgomery was really good on that first drive in particular. Great blocking from the offensive line as well. I think they brought Gibbs out on the second possession. He caught like a screen pass and got a little chunk from that. But Montgomery was rolling early on. Then they go to Gibbs to start the second half, and he provides a shot in the arm. I think there are situations where mixing and matching them can work, but at the same time, bringing a guy in that is, more of a fresh legs, come out there and give you a big jolt on a drive is really a good thing. And it's a luxury that the Lions have that a lot of teams don't. And when each guy turns in a touchdown drive for you, then I don't know. I thought it was fine overall. You go Montgomery early, then Gibbs in the middle, and then Montgomery finished it off with great running on that final drive, and caught a screen passes, or not a screen pass, more of a check down. Juked a couple guys, picked up the first down. They were able to kneel it out after that. So both guys played well, and you got the win. So I'm not going to complain too much.
Yeah, and Jahmyr Gibbs is now leading the NFL in yards per carry at 6.4. The offensive line, we've talked about it previously, especially Taylor Decker and Graham Glasgow on that left side, who have not played their best football. In this game, did you feel like, was the offensive line back in pass protection to the level that you had that we had set for them, the expectations? Like, did you feel that Decker kind of had a bounce back game?
Yeah, I thought they gave up one sack on like an organic rush, and it was from Sewell, which was surprising, but it seemed pretty clear upon replay that he stepped on Kevin Zeitler's foot and he kind of slipped, and so understandable. But I was pretty concerned coming in with Decker and how he was going to be able to handle Rashawn Gary and some of the other pass rushers that the Packers have. But I thought in terms of the organic rush protection was fine. Packers had some blitz that I did think got home with decent effectiveness that got them off the field on a couple occasions, but overall they did fine. So I think that was a nice little step forward.
Yeah, and that was really the key. Is coming into this game, we highlighted the Packers have some good young pass rushers, and it was going to be interesting to see how they match up. Sewell gives up the 9th sack of his career, first of the season. A rare instance of him giving one up, and as you said, it's because probably because he tripped on Zeitler. Though give credit to the Packers pass rush as well. They had their moments. And this was another game where Amon-Ra St. Brown looked like his normal, solid, reliable self. Catches a jump ball in the end zone, which is something you don't really see from him before he had one of the funniest celebrations of the year with the little headstand. So the second game without Jameson Williams, that the Lions, they win both of the games while JMO's suspended. What did you see from the Lions pass catchers? I noticed there was a lot more 3 wide receiver sets with both Tim Patrick and Allen Robinson on the field in this one.
Yeah, I thought Allen Robinson made a nice catch, or I don't know if it was a nice catch. It was an important catch on 3rd and 1. He got himself open, brought it in. It's a nice catch in the context of this game because the Packers receivers had hands of stone in this one. So even routine catches were not a given. But anyway, he picked up that first down. Patrick, I don't remember doing a whole lot. Amon-Ra was really the story at the receiver position in this game for me. He has that touchdown catch, which is an insane route. He comes in motion, he runs her out, then he stops, stutter steps, turns around, and then finishes it. And it's just a dime from Goff. Great play there. He had another big gain over the middle, I think, on the first drive of the second half. So they did enough. This wasn't a game where JMO's absence was going to be a big deal because of the rain, and then the game state in the second half, Lions really kind of shut it down from a passing standpoint on some of those drives. But they got enough contributions from their big producers, and Sam Laporta had a couple good catches as well, including one that was kind of fluttering over the middle on I think maybe the field goal drive in the second quarter was one of those drives. But anyway, um, so everyone that was really needed to chipped in, and again, it's just sort of a story of adapting to the game state and doing enough that was necessary to win.
Yeah, and it's the case that it kind of has been all season, where the offense, there's not a whole lot to talk about because they did their job in the rain. Could they have scored more than 17 points? Sure, but in the second half, after they go up 3 scores, they were very content to just work the clock, and they were fine punting it because the defense was doing their job as well with their bend but don't break style. The Amon-Ra touchdown that you mentioned, that route, it actually looked pretty similar to Amon-Ra's touchdown from the game in Lambeau last year, just in the red zone rather than from like the 40-yard line, where he does that sort of stop and wheel after the little hitch. And that's why I think it was Nixon who was in coverage there. He was able to recover because it is something they have seen before. But Amon-Ra is so good at those double moves. He's so good at selling his routes, and he's one of the best route runners in the NFL. That's why he is so dominant from the slot. So it's always good to see him have a good day. Do you have any other standout performances or keynotes from the offense here?
Just a really good offensive line day overall, and just a really solid performance all around. I think there's some game theory sort of things to discuss in terms of them going maybe too conservative in the second half, protecting a lead. But when they needed to go down the field and get points, they did a pretty good job of that. They score on. They only had 3 drives in the first half with how short of a
Yeah.
game this was in terms of possessions, but they got points on 2 of the 3. Then they scored a touchdown first drive of the third quarter. So that's 3 scores on 4 drives. And really a good foot forward for them. And then after that, they got a more conservative. But overall, I think a pretty solid day from the offense, and considering the rain and everything else, again, they did enough.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll flip over to the defense, and there's no way to really avoid this conversation, so I think we might as well just start with it. The Brian Branch ejection. First, just what were your thoughts on that play and the ensuing penalties?
It was that was a questionable play. Um, it's a bad hit. It's definitely the 15-yard penalty. My issue with it is I just don't really know what the sort of standard is, and I don't think we have clear precedent. In college football, we have the targeting rule that has been pretty hashed out and discussed over the years. But in the NFL, we don't really have a good understanding of what merits a suspension, or not a suspension, an ejection, and what doesn't. And so I was just kind of like, yeah, this is a bad hit. It should be flagged. But there was one earlier in the day, I think, from Jordan Poyer in the Bills-Dolphins game that wasn't an ejection. So I'm just kind of like, I don't know what the difference between these two things is. And again, the standard isn't really established. I do wonder if it being a national TV game made the NFL feel like we got to get involved here, as opposed to just a random 1 o'clock game no one is watching. I think just the way it was handled fed into Branch's meltdown, and the gesture going off the field and the extra 15-yard penalty tacked on, because they throw the first flag and it's like, okay, yeah, I see that. And then we sit there for a little bit, and then all of a sudden they come back and they're like, nope, actually it's an ejection. And I was like, what? Like, if you're going to do it, you got to just do it. And I think that's my biggest thing. But it's not how it happened. Supposedly, New York called in and said, you need to make this happen. And so, I don't know. Weird play. Definitely was a hit that Branch needs to do a better job avoiding. You just gotta live with it, I guess.
Yeah, so the explanation from the league was that Branch had ample opportunity to pull up from that hit after the ball was gone, which I generally agree with. It like even in real time, you see the ball go by and Branch is still he acknowledges that and still lowers his head for the hit. Part of that is just it's a bad throw by Love. He underthrows his receiver, which causes him to slow up and turn around in bounds rather than catching that in stride as he goes out. But at the end of the day, the league has said that they want to outline this kind of hit, so you have to throw a flag. The ejection is the weird part of this because while that is a flag that's an unnecessary roughness, you don't need to do that. The ejection precedent is a little weird because, as you mentioned, there's flags throughout the league that on similar plays that weren't ejections. So if you're gonna make that an ejection, I'm okay with that. Based on what the league has said, they want to outline that hit, so I'm okay with it if they call it every time. And this is always the case in refing or suspensions across sports. You and I are very familiar with the Department of Player Safety in the NHL that is notoriously inconsistent with their punishments handed down. And so it's just about finding the consistency there. There was the Jordan Poirier one you mentioned. There was also a hit in the Saints game against Chris Olave that knocked him out of the game. Hospital ball from Derek Carr, but it's a hit to the head, and it was flagged, but there was no ejection. So it's really just about consistency, and obviously the fact that it happened to the Lions' best defender is also a huge blow. Luckily, his safety duo stepped up and made a big game-changing play that we'll talk about as well. But definitely was a kick in the gut for the Lions that just it hurt their chances of winning. Obviously, they still won fairly comfortably, but Branch has got to know that he can't do that. So with that being said, let's just talk about the secondary at large because this is a weird one where the Packers receivers, as you mentioned, had some stone hands in this one. I know there was so I didn't catch this game live. But in the plays that I saw the one where Ennis Rakestraw came in and had to cover Jaden Reed on a 4th and 5, and he made a great play. But in general, what did you see from the corner trio of Amik Robertson, Terrion Arnold, and Carlton Davis in this one?
I honestly thought they were okay. I thought the coverage in this game was pretty good. I thought it was an encouraging improvement from when we saw them play the Packers last year, which that second game at Ford Field on Thanksgiving was really a rough showing from the secondary. They got pretty good coverage in this game. Overall, there were some busts here and there. They had a zone bust on Jaden Reed over the middle, but a lot of the stuff was pretty well covered. I mean, the branch targeting hit is Melton breaking open against Robertson, but Love is standing back there for like 8-9 seconds. I mean, eventually guys are going to get open when you give them that amount of time. They have a 4th and 5 slot fade conversion to Jaden Reed later in the game, and Rakestraw covers that perfectly. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. I mean, maybe, okay, get your head turned around. That's hard with a slot fade. And it's just a perfect throw, perfect catch to a great receiver. So there was some of that stuff going on. They did get the advantage of some drops and things like that. But overall, I thought it was okay. And honestly, the biggest thing I might have on this is Amik Robertson took a bad taunting personal foul. I believe, I think it was going to be 4th down while the Packers were in Lions territory, and it gives them a fresh set of downs. That's my biggest negative in this game because there wasn't really one particular play that a guy got toasted or anything for a big gain. So again, a nice improvement, and just gotta keep it going.
Yeah, and Amik got a good earful from Aaron Glenn, and Aaron Glenn was gesturing like the "you got to think" from the sidelines. One note on Terrion that we've talked about Terrion obviously throughout the season, but it's been a while since we had a real conversation about his progress. Currently, I saw this a couple of minutes ago. So Patrick Surtain leads the NFL corners in single coverage percentage rate, meaning he is on an island covering a guy by himself the most. Terrion Arnold is second in the entire league. So, he's been improving week after week, and it's also important to note that he's been improving while on an island. We criticized the Matt Patricia Lions for putting Jeff Okuda on an island when he was a rookie, and it's you can't expect that from him. It's not fair. Terrion Arnold is being given a very similar role, and he is doing fine. He is getting better week after week. His coverage grades are improving week after week. He's not picking up the same amount of flags he was at the start of the season. He's been improving in single coverage. I think Carlton Davis is also fifth in that same stat as well. The Lions are very comfortable with their two outside corners and just leaving them on an island and letting their safeties roam, which has allowed, obviously, a ton of takeaways from that safety position as well. So just want to add some context there that Terrion, we should praise him for the job he's been doing.
Yeah, I think he hasn't had a penalty since the Seahawks game, which was a while ago now, before the bye week. So it's been a nice little run here where he does get beat from time to time, but the handsiness isn't as much. And it just seems like he's being targeted quite a bit less. And generally speaking, that's a good sign when you're a corner if you're not being targeted as much. So I like where he's been coming along. I think Davis has been steady all year. I didn't notice him too much in this game. Robertson, I think, got the most action out of the three corners. So overall, I think a solid day and encouraging progress as this year goes along.
Yeah, I think the biggest, like the one time I noticed Carlton was when he blew up that screen pass by just completely sprinting past his block and breaking that up. The only criticism I really have of the corners right now is that they aren't getting picks, but I mean, that's a minor complaint because you'd be getting so many from the safeties. And obviously, this feels good for me, who predicted that Kirby Joseph would be top 3 in the NFL. He now ties Xavier McKinney for the top spot with another interception in this game, his first pick six, his fourth interception against the Packers in his career. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. This dude is one of the league's best ball hawks, plain and simple.
Well, this one, you can call it a ball hawk interception, but a little bit different than a lot of the ones he's got.
Yeah.
Not exactly playing center field.
How often does he blitz?
He's lurking in the backfield, and I'm not sure Love actually saw him, but it does play into what we've discussed with Jordan Love this year, which is that the decision-making goes downhill when he is under fire. He tries to throw it while being sacked way too often. He had one play in the third or fourth quarter where he's running to the sideline and about to get hit, and he still tries to throw it, and it flutters up in the air but lands out of bounds. And Tom Brady on the broadcast was just aghast at that one. And then you have this interception where, again, it's just he's got to learn to just eat it sometimes, and that if you're getting hit, you're getting sacked, just let it go. And unfortunately for the Packers, but good news for us, he floats that one up there, and Joseph snags it and has a pretty easy pick six. And that play totally turned the entire game around because it was a 10-3 game. Packers were out near their own 40-yard line with under a minute to go, but certainly trying to drive to get in field goal range and trim the lead further. And instead, the Lions go from up 7 to up 14, and they get the ball out of half. And they were able to shut down the remaining 30 seconds of the half. They go out to start the second half, score a touchdown. And so basically it just kind of cascaded for the Packers in the span of about 10 minutes of game time, spanning the end of the second quarter into the early third quarter. It went from a 7-3 game where the Packers were driving at the time of the Branch ejection to down 24-3 with 25 minutes to go. And the game kind of just got out of hand from them, and that was because of this interception. And we just continue to see this with the Lions safeties. They make game-changing plays that really do swing the win probability, the EPA, all that stuff. And, it stands out here.
Yeah, and, after that play, the Lions go up, and they stay in control for the entire second half. The Packers finally got in the end zone with 3 minutes to go. But, when you're up 24-3 in the first 5 minutes of the third quarter, the fact that you only gave up a field goal for most of the remaining time is a pretty good sign. Now, Jordan Love specifically, I don't know if it was you or so I saw this somewhere, where he almost had too much time to throw and he was overthinking anything or everything. Part of that, well, it's because the lack of pass rush the Lions were getting. Ali McNeil, I think, had 7 pressures in this game, and I think the Lions had 9 total. So, not a great day from the pass rush. Obviously, the Lions acquired some help, and they'll be getting more with Josh Pascal coming back as well. But the run defense has also taken a bit of a step back recently. So, to put it plainly, is this simply a edge position issue with both the pass rush and the run defense?
Yeah, so on the topic of the run defense with the edge position, I want to just put this. I think a lot of the issues they had in run defense in this game were edge related, which I think is important to discuss here. The first drive, they have issues on one with the defensive tackles, Smith and O'Connor, which basically practice squad players. You're pulling up their roster trying to figure out who these guys are. They have one long run where they cut it out when Muhammad gets caught inside. They're able to cut it off tackle. Second drive on run defense, Thomas at the edge loses his position. Branch and Anzalone aren't where they need to be, and it's 30 or yards for Jacobs on that one. And it kind of continued for some of the game. There's another long run where James Houston loses the edge. I mean, the loss of Josh Pascal in this game was so noticeable, and the loss of Hutchinson, obviously, but just not having another serious edge. You just really can't go out there and play 2 practice squad players at edge and not get had in different ways. And they weren't able to get pass rush consistently because of it. But people ignore how big of a deal it's been for the run defense, and that the Lions really had a tremendous luxury. You think about last year when they were number 1 run defense, you had Hutchinson, who was a great run defender at edge. You have Pascal, who's a good run defender at edge. John Kaminsky was a good run defender at edge. And now you don't have any of those guys. And it's created this vulnerability, and it's definitely something that's going to have to get looked at, because I think McNeil and Reeder are playing fine. Onzarike is so-so as a run defender, but the depth there, and then the real problem at edge is coming home to bite him a little bit. But thankfully, there is some help on the way.
Yep, and if and when the Lions get to points in the playoffs, the John Kaminsky might also be able to come back. We'll see. That's a bit of a weird case. Derek Barnes, when he comes back, will also help the run defense as well. For what it's worth, though, the linebackers are doing their part, because Jack Campbell continues to quietly ascend to being a top 10 linebacker, maybe even better than that in the league. He had, what was it, like 12 or 13 tackles in this game?
I can check the box score. It was a lot.
Yeah, he was everywhere. He was flying around the line of scrimmage. It might have been Anzalone and Campbell. Campbell was one of the guys in on the 4th and 1 stop against Jacobs.
He was mostly the guy that did it. He's the one who came through and really just stuffed Jacobs right in his track. I mean, you normally expect a running back to drag the linebacker forward. It was a hell of a play. Box score shows, I think 13 is what it looks like. 6 solo, 7 assisted.
Yeah. So Jack Campbell has, we know he's a good run defender. He hasn't, I haven't noticed him in coverage that much, which, we talk about this with the corners, is generally a good thing when you don't notice them. But Campbell has it's been a quiet ascent into a very pivotal piece of the Lions defense. Anzalone hasn't been quite as dominant as he was to start the year or last season, but he has also continued to be quite good. So that helps. The interior guys have been good. I think Levi, once he goes back to being more of a defensive tackle, will be good for him, because him being forced to play more edge, not ideal. Same with Wingo, not ideal, but again, we'll talk about this in a bit. Help is on the way. Do you have any other major defensive notes on this one?
Not really. There's a few things to discuss. The end of the half is an interesting thing to discuss, where they have a nice play by Brandon Joseph where he lets Jaden Reed catch a ball, but it's inbounds, and it's a big gain. That's a 41-yard gain that was completely irrelevant, kind of why the box score looks skewed in part. That he understood, hey, I'll just let Reed catch this. He'll land inbounds. There's no way the Packers, especially with Love, who was really moving really badly at that point in the game. It seemed like Malik Willis was going to come in for a period of the contest, but he lets Reed catch it, and he just knows, okay, clock will run out. We'll go to halftime. That was a savvy play. And in the second half, they were playing a little bit softer defense at different points. So total yardage and yards per play looks a little high, but again, it's a pretty score effects related thing. A lot like last week with the Titans. It's been a couple weeks in a row where we've had this going on, and that's where you can use some of the advanced metrics to parse out, as opposed to total yardage, what the really story of the game was.
Yeah, the stats and the PFF grades, which especially with quarterbacks, you have been very vocal in your criticisms of, are going to favor Jordan Love a lot more than what actually happened, which is Jordan Love did not have a good game, and that's the main story. The rain really got to him, the injury really got to him, and his decision making cost them. So the game in Detroit in week 14 is going to be very interesting because both teams, it's a Thursday night football game, but both teams will have the full week off after Thanksgiving, and it's indoors, like perfect conditions. That's where we're going to see a lot of what the Packers are made of down the stretch there. So yeah, we'll flip this over to I don't know. Do you have any special teams notes before we get to game theory?
Yeah, Jaden Reed, I thought, had some weird fair catches that didn't make sense to me. It looked like he had opportunities to break off a 10 or 15-yard return, and he was really quick to signal fair catch. That helped Jack Fox, who was really good again. He had one punt where it was a low snap, very dangerously backed up in his own territory, like right near his own goal line. Had no problem leaning down, catching it, getting it away, and flipped the field. I mean, Fox remains great. Bates made a field goal outdoors. It wasn't a super long one, but never take that for granted on a day like that one, especially when the Packers did miss a field goal. So, good day for the special teams, I think, overall.
Yeah, and McManus missing that kick is notable because even though it is partly the conditions, the Packers just brought him in a couple of weeks ago. So the Packers kicking woes are noteworthy. The Vikings have some kicking woes now because their rookie kicker is on IR. The NFC North isn't exactly known for amazing field goal kicking. So Bates doing his job will always be a welcome sight. Now on to game theory. What do you got?
Well, first of all, 4th-and-1 decision. They go in the early third quarter. I have no issue with that, where they were deep in Packers territory. They score a touchdown on it, so it really worked out in that sense, but I have no issue with going there. Just something to mention. And Campbell challenges a toe tap catch from Jaden Reed. I didn't mind it as a challenge. I thought it looked really close. Turned out on the super high def angle they showed us, there was green between the toes and the line. Credit to them, but I wasn't too mad about that challenge decision. Beyond that, just the question of, were they a little too conservative on offense in the second half? They have won their first drive after going up 24-3. They force a punt for the Packers. They get it back. They're backed way up in their own territory, and they don't get anything out of it. I think that one is okay. But then after the Packers score a field goal to make it 24-6, late in the third quarter, Lions come out. They run it twice for no gain, and then throw a quick incompletion and punt. I was kind of going back and forth on it, honestly. On one hand, I think they understood that turning the ball over was the way they were going to lose this game. Once they got that firm lead, they just understood that don't give it back to Green Bay, don't give them advantageous field position. We should be able to do this. But there was definitely a point leading up to that 4th-and-1 stuff by Campbell where it did feel starting to get a little uncomfortable and a little dicey with the way they had kind of gone into turtle mode a little bit. And so I kind of go back and forth about the decision making there. Again, it ended up working out in the end, but just something to file away.
Yeah, and like I know you and I generally favor more aggression. Maybe not like full like throttle, but we do tend to err on the side of go for it or, take a few more risks. So, it is what it is. In the context of this being a very weather-based game, I get it. And you're up big. You don't want to risk any turnovers. I get it. It's okay in the context of this game. But if this were a game in Detroit or a playoff game, you'd want to see a little bit more killer instinct. One more note. I actually did have a problem with in on the first touchdown drive where it's goal to go and the Lions run it three straight times to set up fourth and goal from the 5. That's another one where it's a little too conservative to set up a all or nothing play. Obviously, they get an encroachment to make it fourth and goal from the 2.5, 3, which sure.
So I think they were not going to go there at the 5-yard line. I think they were hard counting, and I think they got the Packers to jump. That's my hunch. Just watching that over, I mean, I was pretty disappointed, like you, in the play calling to get into that 4th and 5.
Mm-hmm.
I was very concerned to see them come out looking like they were going to go for it. But then when Goff did like the fist pump after the encroachment penalty, yeah, that to me seemed to signal that he was trying to induce that offsides, and that then opened the door to go. Because then at 4th and goal from the 2.5, sure, this is what the Lions do. Go for it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll never know, but that's my hunch.
One note on that specifically. When is the last time you saw the Lions draw someone offside and then actually run the play for the free play? I don't know if it's a Goff thing, but they never do that. Goff is always content to just be like, okay, they came offsides, give us 5 yards, and never take the shot. So
Well, they've been burned a few times over in different games where they thought they had the free play,
Yeah.
and then didn't. So I guess better safe than sorry.
yeah, touche. So aside from that, though, coaching, game theory, do we anything there?
I thought they were well prepared for this game. I think they were a better coach team than the Packers. Their players executed better. They made fewer mistakes. They didn't drop passes. They didn't have issues with the snapping, which was a major problem for the Packers. They could not, for different points in this game, the snaps were too low, too wide. Love was dropping them. I mean, that killed that drive where they kicked the field goal to go 24-6. The Packers totally drive was just ended by 2 bad snaps in a row that turned into fumbles that Love had to fall on. Lions had none of those issues. So you really would not have been able to tell that the Lions were the dome team, quote unquote. Even though we know the Goff in cold weather stats, but I think the way these teams are constructed, the Lions are the team better fit for these kinds of games compared to the Packers. Like, yes, Packers are the cold weather team. That's their stadium, blah, blah, blah. But they're also kind of flat track bullies a little bit. They throw the ball, down the field a lot. They don't have the best running game in the world. It's something that's struggled a little bit for them this year. Whereas the Lions are very comfortable just ground and pound playing that kind of game. And it showed.
Yeah, like the Lions are very content to play bully ball, rain or shine, like doesn't really matter. They can shed, even though they only have 3 outdoor games this year, and one of them is in California. They can shed the the dome merchant label a little bit. So moving on to the weekly NFL recap. This is gonna take a minute because we have a lot to get through. There was some trades, there was a lot of transactions. Starting first with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn's old friends up in New Orleans. Dennis Allen has finally been fired after losing to the Panthers. Long overdue. Very long overdue. The Saints have been kind of spinning their tires for a while, and now it looks like they're finally ready to bottom out. So, I don't know. Do you have any takes on the Saints?
Not really. They lose to the Panthers in a pretty close game that ends up being the death knell for possibly this era of Saints football. A rebuild there just feels so needed.
Yeah.
They need a long-term solution at quarterback, but they also just need better players. I'm not a capologist. I don't know exactly what their situation is. I just know everyone says it's apocalyptic, and they
Well,
are locked into a bunch of guys they like cannot get rid of, and they just keep kicking the can down the road.
what we see this every year where we enter the season, and it's like, how do the Saints have negative 100 million in cap space? Like, it's every year, and they keep restructuring deals and pushing that down the road, and it finally needs to rear its head. They need to bottom out. The only note is that I had is this: would this be a possibility for Aaron Glenn in the offseason? Because when Dennis Allen was hired, Aaron Glenn was the other main candidate they were considering. Obviously, they go with Dennis Allen, but Aaron Glenn will probably get a call for that job this summer. I don't know if he's interested in it, but that is something to monitor. We'll talk about this offseason. Elsewhere in the league, the Raiders fired their offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy. All of Chicago rejoices because they warned Vegas about him. Speaking of the Bears, they fall to the Cardinals in the NFC Mid Bowl. I don't know, like the Caleb Williams and that offense, they look real bad.
We have to enjoy the beauty of that game. I don't know if you saw this in the drive chart, but the Chicago Bears in this game have a 10-play, 10-yard drive that ends in a turnover on downs, eating up 4 minutes, 58 seconds of possession.
So, okay, so hold on. I'm assuming there was one first down, maybe a penalty that caused another first down, and then a huge sack. Is that how they got to only 10 yards?
Pretty much. It was Swift minus 2-yard carry, Williams
Okay.
17-yard pass to Odunze,
Okay.
Swift 3-yard carry, Williams 2-yard scramble, Johnson 1-yard run, Williams 6-yard pass to Allen. Then Williams incompletion, Williams minus 1-yard sack, Williams minus 16-yard sack.
Ah, there it is. So I had I think this was week 2 or 3. I said this, but I had a very obscure prediction that Caleb Williams would lead the NFL in sack yards lost. This game was a very good step in that direction for me.
I don't think it's even going to be close at this point.
Yeah, I think
6 sacks minus 45 yards this week, and it feels like that's his stat line almost every week.
his biggest competition was Deshaun Watson and Gardner Minshew. Minshew is no longer starting, and Watson is obviously out for the year. So, looking good.
Got it locked up, I guess. It was a good win, I will say, for the Cardinals, and they went out and they added somebody in the trade market. I think it was yesterday. Not a big acquisition, but kind of signals that they are somewhat serious about this season. They're 5-4 on the year, first in the NFC West. And you look at their schedule, and this is where the last place schedule pays its dividends, because they get the Jets this week at home. That's winnable. Gets you to 6 wins. At Seahawks, at Vikings, those are tougher. Home to Seahawks, you hope you can win that one, right? So that gets you to 7. Home to Patriots, that's 8. At Carolina, that's 9. I mean, and then it's just a matter of, can you beat Rams or Niners to close the season? 10 wins probably gets you in, potentially. Maybe it wins that division. I mean, they're in the conversation, and got to give them credit for a nice season.
Yeah, they're first in the division right now. With that entire division is just spinning its tires right now. The Seahawks look a little lost at times. The Rams are resurgent now that they are getting guys back from injury. The Niners been also beat up a lot with injuries, but they're starting to find their groove, and McCaffrey's coming back, so we'll see how that goes this week. But that division is it's kind of the mid version of the NFC North, where it's like all these teams are in the race and all of them could do something, except there's actually no room for them all to make it. Whereas the NFC North, you might have 3 teams make the playoffs because they're all winning games against the opponents that they need to beat. Speaking of actually, maybe we should just talk about the Rams real quick, because they are suddenly back in the mix. Stafford and McVay, they're doing their thing over there. I think they're 4-4 now, or 4-5. They're doing good. They will absolutely be in the mix for a wild card spot on their current trajectory, or at the very least are going to be an annoying team for playoff contenders to play down the stretch.
Yeah, that Rams Seahawks game was hell of an ending in
Mm.
overtime in particular. That unreal throw from Stafford to clinch it. I thought the Seahawks did the right thing in that they went for that 4th and 1, got stuffed, is what it is. But you get the ball to start overtime, go score a touchdown. Like I have no issue whatsoever in the way they handled that. I think you can make a case they should have gone for 2 when they scored the tying touchdown late in the fourth quarter. That was a trend we saw this week. It manifested again on Monday night between the Chiefs and the Bucks. And you have a chance to win the game late, and it's a kind of a toss-up game, or you're the underdog. I think sometimes it's better to go for 2 there. But credit to the Rams; they've won 3 in a row now. They are up to 1-4 4-4 on the season, up from 1-4 not that long ago. They got the Dolphins this coming week. That's doable. Got the Patriots the week after that. Saints a couple weeks after. Jets later on. Cardinals at home. There's a path for them too. I mean, this division is pretty wide open. I think the Niners are clearly the best team, but the Niners have a really hard schedule, and the other teams don't. And that's going to be the dynamic to watch here.
If the Rams and Cardinals can steal another game against the Niners down the stretch, that could be the division. And again, there's a pathway to the Niners losing 7 games this year, 7-8 games this year. So we'll see what happens. Speaking of that Monday night game, I don't know if you saw Todd Bowles' explanation for why the Bucks did not go for 2 at the end of regulation, but it was borderline the most incompetent answer I've heard from a coach this season.
I did not.
So he said the reason they didn't go for 2 is because they didn't want to deal with the weather. And then, so their solution to that is let's go to overtime, risk a coin toss, which you end up losing. But even if you get it, then let's deal with the weather for a whole drive instead of 1 2-yard play. Very, very interesting to say the least. And the Bucks, who are a talented team, obviously they beat the Lions, they almost beat the Chiefs, are now below 500 just because they're losing these tight games. They lost both games to the Falcons. They lose this one in overtime. Chiefs remain undefeated because God hates everyone, and we'll see who, if anyone, can eventually knock them off. The Vikings on Sunday Night Football survive the Joe Flacco-led Colts. This was a game we had maybe a tiny bit of optimism that maybe a veteran QB could beat this gimmicky defense. Alas, they could not. Justin Jefferson makes a few great plays. Jordan Addison has a great touchdown.
I thought Flacco was able to read it and interpret the defense well. He just is like 40 years old and his body doesn't work anymore. I mean, he was finding open guys. The ball was bouncing before it hit those guys. So it is what it is. I hadn't watched the Colts much, as we discussed last week with the Richardson saga. That was my first time watching them, and oof, that was that was a pretty bad game to watch for a lot of the game. A lot of turnovers in that first half. Was it 3 missed field goals? Just a really sloppy game. But Vikings get the win, and I think now at this point, when you compare the schedules remaining, it's pretty clear that the Vikings are the challenge in the division to me, compared to the Packers.
Yeah, we'll see. I think the North is gonna come down to the interdivisional games. The Lions
Yeah.
obviously get a good leg up. You kind of want the Packers to beat the Vikings in the rematch so that they're 1-1 against each other. You hope the Bears can knock each of them off once, and then Lions take
Well,
care of
and
business.
the story with the Packers is that they're 0-2 in the division, and both of those were against the other marquee teams at home.
Yep. Yeah,
So they
you
got to
lose
go
both your home games.
got to go to Ford Field and go to, what is that one? U.S. Bank Stadium.
Yeah,
That's the name. Yeah. So
and
it's a tough climb for them.
those are like I say this every year, but I love getting the road divisional games out of the way earlier because those are the most quote unquote intimidating games of the year. Playing in Minnesota is always tough. Playing in Green Bay is not recently, but there's a bit of an aura to it, right? And for Green Bay, playing in Minnesota is obviously going to be very tough. In Detroit, in a primetime Thursday night football game, that place is going to be so loud That's going to be tough because Ford Field has quickly become one of the better home field advantages in the league. It's going to be a factor. So we'll see what they can do. Speaking of the Colts, the Lions have them coming up in 3 weeks. So that should be nice. We got 3 straight against the AFC South. We'll see if we can keep the NFC North dominance over that division going. We'll preview the Texans game shortly here. Now, on to some of the league-wide news. There was some minor transactions, such as Khalil Herbert being traded to the Bengals, Preston Smith being traded to the Steelers, stuff like that. The biggest move of the day, though, came out of Washington as the Washington Commanders trade a third, a fourth, and a sixth in exchange for Marshawn Lattimore and a fifth-round pick. This is a major move for a team that feels its window is open now with a rookie, Jaden Daniels. And Marshawn Lattimore has been a very good corner for a long time, dealt with some injury issues, but this is a major move for a big-time NFC contender at this point.
Yeah, I haven't followed the Commanders too closely in terms of their personnel, but my understanding is they were playing Mike Sainristil at corner, and that this will allow him to shift over to nickel, which is from a size standpoint his natural position. So that's good news for them. I like this move. Look, the Commanders have gone a long time since winning a playoff game. I think 2005 maybe is their last one. It was a long time ago, and they're in a driver's seat in this division with a still decently favorable schedule remaining. But the Eagles are getting hot, and it's going to be a battle to the finish line. They got 2 huge divisional games coming up against Philadelphia, and they're going to need to win those games to win this division. And I laud them for going for it, pushing some chips in. I didn't think the acquisition price was that high on Lattimore. So overall, I like this move for them. And I think it is going to go a long way towards locking them in as a playoff team at the very least, and potentially give them the path to win that division and get a home playoff game.
Yep, and looking at their schedule, this is a little unrelated, but they have a Week 14 bye, and I hate that because why are there Week 14 bye? They have their bye week 9 weeks after the Lions. Why is that a thing? I think
the Week 10 bye or Week 9 bye is by far the best. The Week 5 bye and the Week 14 are just so weird.
Yeah, like if you're a team that's contending for a playoff spot, it's actually kind of great because then you get to heal up and you get a week off to recharge for that final push into the postseason and then potentially beyond. But if you're like, say you're the Chiefs and you had a late bye, it almost would be a disaster because you'd get a bye week, then you are pushing for another bye week, and you'd almost be playing you'd play like 4 games before the end of the season, and you have 2 bye weeks sandwiched in there. I don't know. It's just weird. It's too close to the playoffs.
Yeah, very strange scheduling quirk.
Yeah, so anyways, the Commanders, respect them for going for it. We'll see what they can do. Now, obviously, for the Lions, the biggest news was they finalized a trade with the Cleveland Browns. They trade a 5th and a 6th round pick to the Browns for Zadarius Smith and a 7th rounder. So it'll be a late 6th turning into an early 7th. That's fine. And then a 5th round pick. Zadarius Smith, they pick up the final $600K on his contract this year. He remains under contract for next year, but it's non-guaranteed, so they can release him if they want. What are the Lions getting in Zadarius Smith?
Well, they're getting a veteran player that has a lot of experience, particularly in this division. And obviously, times change. Things are different than they were necessarily when he was at his peak. I think 2019 was his best season. But he's played in these conditions on these teams. He was on the Vikings as recently as a couple years ago in 2022. 60 career sacks. He had 13.5 in 2019 with Green Bay, 12.5 in 2020 with Green Bay. And as a result of his time with those teams, he's played for some really good teams. And he's played in big playoff games. The 2019 Packers team won a home playoff game, then lost in the NFC Championship game to the Niners. And the same thing in the next round, or the next year, they beat the Rams, and then they lost at home in a very tough and painful game to the Buccaneers, which was enjoyable viewing for us, but rough for Zadarius Smith. And then he played in playoff games in 2021, 2022, and last year for Cleveland as well. So this is a guy that has playoff experience. He was one of the better pure pass rushers in the NFL at his peak. Second team All Pro 4 years ago, 3-time Pro Bowler. Um, Graded out really well in PFF last season on a really good Browns defense. This year's been a come down a bit, but his numbers have ticked up a bit the last few weeks. Possibly the old play better so you can get get the hell out of the team you're on sort of thing. I don't know how much the general incompetence and demoralizing nature of the Browns has affected his performance, but I think coming into a Lions team, playing on a line with potentially McNeil and Reeder in the middle, drawing double teams, Kaminsky on the other side who can bull rush and compress a pocket, I think that's going to put Smith in a good position to succeed, and he will instantly become the Lions' best edge rusher. I think it's a good trade. I think it was the guy that by far made the most sense from a cost standpoint, especially when you consider the fact that the Giants ended up not trading Azeez Ojulari because no one would give up a 4th-round pick for a rental. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, in the context of that market, this is the one that made sense, and they had to do it. So it's a good thing they did.
Yeah, if like I'm shocked the Giants, especially after this trade went through, didn't lower their price because you're not using this player anyways. He's going to leave in free agency. You might as well take the pick. You're not going to get a comp pick for him. Giants mismanagement can be studied another day. For the Lions, as you said, having the interior guys, Pascal off the edge will help as well because he's back. I don't know if Smith, how much he'll play this week. The Lions had talked about they're giving him, we're recording on Wednesday, so they're giving him today and tomorrow off, and they'll see where he's at on Friday because this is the Browns bye week. Obviously, the Lions have already had their bye week, but they want to make sure that Smith gets some rest in so that his body is, geared up for the playoffs. So if he does play, I'd imagine it's only a handful of snaps, probably pure pass rushing snaps, and then you really start to unleash him against the Jags and Colts in the next few weeks. So with Smith is not known for his run defense, but he is still competent, which is a marginal improvement over the practice squad fodder that the Lions are currently sending out there. In general, having Smith and Pascal should allow this run defense to get back to the top 3-ish unit that it is instead of being, top 10 where it is right now with the problems on the edge. So that'll be a big boost. And then, pass rush, just get pressure, literally force a quarterback off their spot every once in a while. That will be big. And again, as I said, Pascal's coming back. The reason he missed 2 games is when he was at Kentucky, he dealt with some cancer issues. The doctors discovered a mass on his shoulder, I believe it was, that was non-cancerous but had to be removed. That's why he's been out of the lineup for a couple weeks, but he's back. He said he expects to play Sunday night. And also, the Lions are getting more secondary help. Both Emmanuel Mosley and Ifeatu Melifonwu's 21-day practice windows have opened. So it seems like defensive reinforcements are coming, which should be a big boost. Especially, Melifonwu with just some depth at safety. The edge guys, going to be a big deal. I don't know. Mosley, just depth. I don't know. Give me some Khalil Dorsey insurance, Kindle Vildor insurance, I guess. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
I think if they can get both those guys back, that'd be great. I'm not necessarily going to get my hopes up just because these 2 guys have been the most injury-prone players on the team over the past year or so. So whenever they're available, that'll be great, but I won't count on them. That said, Melifonwu is a really good football player. We've seen him play. He was a huge piece for the Lions last season down the stretch. He had the big interception to clinch the game against the Vikings that won the division last year. He showed his prowess as a blitzer. It's a position where they're a little thin. I thought Brandon Joseph played admirably against Green Bay, but can always use more help, and Melifonwu would be a big boost. And obviously, Mosley was a pretty good corner when he was healthy. That was eons ago at this point, given the back-to-back devastating injuries that he has dealt with. but that's another guy you could add to the mix and help your secondary depth as well on what's already an improved unit. So I think both those things are good news. I'm just not going to bank on it too much. I do want to note one thing about Zadarius Smith. His contract, I don't know if you've looked at it. It's a little interesting. The Lions are in a nice position because it doesn't hurt the rollover cap at all. They're only on the hook for $605,000 for the remainder of the year. Browns are eating $4.5 million dead cap. It has a 2025 option that is at face value fairly affordable, 1.2 million base salary, but there's a $2 million bonus due on the third day of the calendar for 2025. He's also got a per game bonus of 510,000 baked in, and there's a bunch of void years tacked on the end. And so I don't know what they're going to do with it. They could cut him for basically no dead cap after the season, which seems possible. They could also extend him and restructure it and push some of that void money down. It'll be interesting to see what they do. He's a guy I wouldn't mind keeping around because I do think they'll need to address the edge situation in the offseason with the draft. I think first or second round pick, that's a position I'd like to add to. But if you could find a way to keep him at a lower price for next year, and you could roll out an edge position of, Pascal and Hutchinson and Zadarius Smith and a first or second round edge rusher, suddenly we're cooking in a way that we weren't this year. So I'll be curious to see how they handle it, but I think it's something that we should mention.
Yeah, and it'll probably entirely depend on how he plays down the stretch and in the playoffs. The Lions will get a real good look. It's essentially a tryout for him to be on the 2025 team, and hopefully he helps them win in this year. In the meantime, edge will definitely be it's probably the biggest need going into next season, specifically a pass rushing edge. I'd be comfortable next year if it's a more of a pass rusher and you just have Pascal take the rundowns and you have someone else take the pass rushing downs. If you get a more complete player, awesome. Obviously would not say no to that, but you just need someone to complement Hutchinson. So now moving on to the Texans, they will be getting Nico Collins back, it looks like. So even though it's been Tank Dell and his band of merry men lately, Nico, their top dog, who was playing like one of the best receivers in the entire league, is coming back. He has a special connection with CJ Stroud, and it's going to be a very big test for the Lions secondary against a very capable Texans passing offense.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you're familiar with the lore of Nico Collins, but when he was at Michigan, he was one of the most frustrating players ever, not because of what he did, but how they used him. Michigan, over 2018, 2019, when he was in his upperclassman years, he was unstoppable in contested catch, deep ball stuff. And Michigan just didn't throw it to him. Like, they just didn't. They do it like once a game, and he'd dunk on a safety for a 50-yard gain. And they're just like, okay, we did. One is enough. That's all we need this week. And it became this rallying cry in the Michigan fan base of throw it to Nico, throw it to Nico, throw it to Nico. And they just never did it. And so I have been incredibly happy to see his success in the NFL because the talent was there. A third round steal, that's purely because of how Michigan used him. The athleticism, the talent was always there. I think it's funny that he's found a connection with CJ Stroud, Ohio State legend who never beat Michigan, and Michigan should have been legend who never beat Ohio State. Fun little marriage there between the two guys, but he's become an absolute monster, and it's going to be tough. That said, the injury to Stephon Diggs does allow you to prioritize Nico in ways that was going to be harder with the myriad receiver weapons that the Texans had on paper coming into this season.
Yep, and obviously the Lions are going to have to be careful of the deep shots to Tank Dell as well, who also has a very good connection with CJ Stroud. It's going to be the biggest test the Lions defense secondary faces, possibly all year. We'll see. I'd probably put it a little bit higher than the Packers in a good weather game, because Jordan Love.
I will just point out, we should note on this that Stroud hasn't played that well this year. Like I'm agreeing with you on the sense of the receiver talent and on paper what it could be, and I think he'll be better with Nico Collins back. But I just haven't been that impressed by him this year. People kind of expected him to take that next step to MVP caliber, and instead it's kind of been a sophomore slump uh,
Mhm.
from what I've seen from him.
Yeah, and while he hasn't been the same as his dominant rookie season, I think it for me it's more so the willingness to push the ball downfield and the as you said the guys that they have. Stroud is not going to shy away from throwing deep, at throwing at Terrion Arnold, throwing at Carlton Davis, at Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch. He won't shy away from it, and that's why it's going to be a test because the Lions have kind of had these games over the past few weeks where teams just aren't really throwing deep. They're forcing them to check down. And I think CJ has a little bit more of a reckless bone in his body where he's willing to take some of these chances. And so we'll see. They also have Joe Mixon, who has had a pretty good year for them. We'll see if the run defense can hold up. It's just going to be a very interesting matchup because the Lions, while they have been a pretty good defense, the DVOA and EPA numbers, I think, are looking a little bit better than the defense actually is. So we're going to kind of put that to the test against a more reckless offense.
Although Stroud is the kind of young quarterback who can make a mistake, and certainly we'll look to see this opportunistic defense continue to strike and continue to turn teams over and create big plays. It's going to be an interesting game, I think, for the Texans because they've been in a little bit of a rut in recent weeks. They beat the Colts in between losses to the Packers and Jets, and those were closer losses, but at the same time, just watching some of the tape of those games, particularly that Jets game on Thursday night, they just kind of looked lifeless for the last little bit here. And now they're back at home. Sounds like they're wearing color rush uniforms. I saw that today. They're wearing all
All
reds
Reds.
at home Sunday night. I mean, they'll be fired up, I think. It's going to be an opportunity for them to be a bounce back game, and the Lions are going to have to be ready for that. It's kind of the conclusion of this window of games going back to the bye week, where after the Seahawks game, we were pretty satisfied overall. We were still disappointed about that Bucks game, but coming out of the bye, it was a 5-week stretch that looked pretty rough on paper. We didn't know that the Cowboys were completely fraudulent at the time, so at Jerry World looked somewhat dicey, and then we had at Vikings, Titans in between, at Packers, at Texans. And that is a tough 5-game stretch, 4 of them on the road. It kind of felt like just win 3 and you're probably okay. And they're 4-0 right now. And now they're closing out this 5-game stretch. And you look after this, and your next 3 games are Jags, Colts, Bears. And then you get harder games against Packers and Bills, yes, but both are at home. I mean, like you can win this game. You've got a chance to really run up a remarkable record.
The Lions have a legitimately decent chance at 14 wins this season, which is shocking. Shocking because you're trying to find they're going to lose a game at some point again. They're not just going to run the table and then go all the way to the Super Bowl and we live happily ever after. They're going to have some sort of adversity and lose a game somewhere in here. Maybe it's that Bills game, maybe it's the Packers, maybe it's the Bears. I don't know. But you got to bank wins while you can. And first of all, shame on you for not claiming the victory of the Lions destroying the Cowboys. I think that's the real story here is the Lions killed the Cowboys spirit. But we'll see. Again, Texans, it's gonna be a big spot. This is a game where I kind of wonder if the Lions being able to play bully ball and just dominate the offense, like the trenches offensively at least, will have a factor. Like I wonder if you could just completely demoralize the Texans if you get up to a lead here. I don't know. We'll see. This is another team that's up and coming. So the Lions are the ultimate test for the Lions have become the litmus test. And instead of it, it's more than just a test of, okay, how do we stack up against one of the league's best? It's also, how do we stack up against a team that is tougher than us? Because the Lions are one of the toughest teams in the league. And if you can't match that toughness and match that energy, you're going to have a bad time. So it's going to be a very big physical test for the Texans as well. And we'll see how that goes. Alex, do you have any concluding thoughts before we wrap up here?
I hope they go out and continue this hot streak and play a good game and just keep it going. The team is playing remarkably well right now. They're number one in DVOA. They're top 5 in offense, defense, and special teams. There was a stat a week ago that all of the teams to have done that previously this far through the season, I think, went to the Super Bowl. Most won them, and I think like the ones who didn't were like the 18-0 Patriots. So I don't know. The win over Green Bay has me and a lot of Lions fans feeling very uncomfortable things about how good this team actually is and what they could do. Maybe we need a reality check this weekend, but if they keep winning, I will not complain.
Yeah, exactly. So you can find me on Twitter at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. You can find the show at Payne and Drain on Twitter as well. If you've listened this far, make sure you follow the show, give us a rating. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. Leave us a comment down below what you think of the episode. If you have any thoughts or questions or concerns, whatever, you can yell at us if you want. And we'll see you guys next time. In the meantime, let's go Lions. Cheers, everyone.